called a lazy decision making. People, human beings, stop thinking. They stop integrating. They stop learning. The knowledge that they take, they accept the knowledge, but they don't process the knowledge. So, and later on now with whatever we have, internet become even bigger, right? AI start taking over. That's completely changed our cognitive functions, the way how we as a society operate, how we read, how we write, how we communicate, how we express our thoughts. AI influenced it to the point that we are no longer that everyone will agree, we don't read more than one page because we cannot focus, we cannot concentrate, right? We cannot calculate in our head, right? We also have a huge issue with communication, right? We write beautifully now, but we don't write by ourselves. No one now writes by themselves. How many times we use all of the assisting tools to check our grammar, to check the flow of our conversation, to check the argument of our conversation. So that means we are diminishing our ability to even write. But then the worst problem that happens, people cannot articulate their thoughts. They cannot communicate. We can text, right? We can say how we heard over the text, but we cannot even talk on the phone and even face to face.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of the CEO Retort. I'm your host, Tim Sheikh, and I've got a phenomenal guest for you this episode, and that is Dr. Valeria Sadovykh, who is a technology strategist at Microsoft, and she uses her expertise in human behavior and the impact of technology and AI on cognitive performance, even potentially cognitive decline, to advise multi-billion-dollar corporations with their digital transformation strategies and indeed their AI strategies and the impact this could potentially have on their users and their customers. She's also involved in Microsoft's own research and development with their AI deployment and their digital transformation as well. I should highlight that this video was actually recorded a few weeks before the American elections because we kind of alluded to the elections very, very briefly. I mean, we're not talking very much about it, but just to make sure that you're aware that we're not actually post the American election. So we, of course, didn't know who's going to win at the time. So yeah, just as a big FYI. Also, I would like you to help us grow this channel. And as always, I ask you to subscribe, like, share, etc. This is all free, but it makes a massive, massive difference for our channel. But if you have got some cash to spare, you're very welcome to check out our sponsors in the description below to help us grow this channel. Or you can also become a member at the ceoretort.com/join. As little as $5 a month will get you access to ad-free episodes and some really cool goodies that I will share with you via email once you register. So yeah, I'll try to keep it mysterious. Anyway, let's get straight into this conversation because we're delving very, very deep into how AI and the digital world today has impacted our brain, the way we think, the way we do things. And we start asking a lot of very difficult questions in terms of what it is that we need to do as individuals and societies. And Valeria is going to share some very interesting strategies that you need to think about. But I think general philosophical points as a society in terms of what we need to do if we want basically AI and digital transformation models to serve us and not the other way around. So without further ado, I hope you're going to enjoy this conversation. My friends, Dr. Valeria Sadovykh.
Yeah, we're talking more from the human perspective, people perspective, our regular life. We obviously all work for organizations and big companies, small companies. And I always try to separate. We have the work, but that things we have to do, but we also have to our own life. That's where we're responsible for. And that's something I will definitely bring to our discussion, our responsibilities in terms of how we use AI, how we use technology and how it impacts our life, not what organization should be doing for us, how we are actually responsible for that.
And in fact, your whole PhD and research is built on that. So, but also, I've seen your story online. Like you've had quite a few interviews. You and I said we had conversations. So, but just for the listeners, and it's kind of my obsession as an entrepreneur. I love to hear the stories of how people, made that decision that led them to the career path that they're in today. And 99% of the time, it's not planned, right? So in your case, I mean, how did you get into the whole human behavior aspects of science that led you towards your current position at Microsoft?
So I think that's then we have to go back to the university time, right? Because I'm actually Eastern European. I moved to New Zealand when I was 17 and I started my education there at the University of Auckland, and I did all my postgraduate, graduate, all of the possible degrees there. And I think when I kind of joined the research, I realized how interesting it is. Overall, I was doing technology, right? I was doing information system, I was doing operations management, people processing, and so on, databases. And then I started seeing how different the research in comparison to practice, because I also, in order for me to do my master's, I had to do work full time. I realized that whatever theoretical contributions we had in academia and research we did in academia and in literature review, it's never kind of was the same in the real life business environment. So that was the first kind of aha moment for me, that I was thinking, why is it not, why so much research been done, but it's used, but it's never, you can never qualify it, right? You never can see the result of this research. And then further I start going deeper into research. And then the first question for me was, at that time, it was so popular to have online social networks. And because I was becoming a more mature adult, right? I was start being interested a lot about the health. And in my family, we had some sort of a health issues with a relative. And I started spending lots of times in the health networks. And those health networks, I saw lots of advices on serious topics like cancer, diabetics, heart disease, pregnancy, Alcoholics Anonymous, and things like that. So I started seeing that people sharing their life without even thinking that they're sharing it to the whole world. And then they freely providing advice. And then there is also a group of people who are freely taking the advice. And in addition to that, there is another group of people that we don't even know, just observing them, but also taking the information on board. So at that moment, I got interested in the human behavior and specifically decision-making process. I wondered why people basically outsource the most important decision about their life, their health, to the wisdom of crowds. And thus the wisdom gets it right. And as we know, the wisdom gets it right only on the 50%. So that was basically my master's research topic. And I always follow it was my life journey, right? I was so focused on the health and I researched the health. My main aspect was cancer, but I also selected, as I mentioned, different other topics to see how people in different topics react and how they take decisions from from all of these online social networks. Later on in life, I become more mature. I start facing financial decisions, right? I was thinking about the investment. How can I, grow my capital? I didn't have much, but that's why I was asking the question, where to invest, how to invest, why the stockbrokers were so expensive. What about all of those online financial tools? Does they make sense? And that's how I also start realizing that people basically put the entire financial scheme of their life online and they talk about it and they're asking for advice, where they should invest, how they're supposed to close their credit card, or what scheme they should put their money on and how much money they have and how much percentage they have. And that's where I realized that, wow, that's even worse than health, because in health I saw already the marketing using those networks to get the decisions to be manipulated. Over here we had even more scam, right, where the people were providing advertisement just to get those people in the loop. And for me, I start really looking into this in terms of hey, does it actually impact the decision-making process? Because in theory there is standard. Back in 1950s, the economical rational man by Simon being defined that human beings go through the intelligent design, choice, and implementation. That is decision-making process that's been developed for now closer to 100 years. Everyone is following it. But then now with the technology, this process change. We're no longer using thinking side. We no longer, yes, we're using intelligence. We go online now. Now we don't go and ask our neighbors, hey, how should I make a decision? We go online, we search for the solutions, and we no longer quantify them, right? We don't do the design of options and choices available. We straight away pick up what is the most easiest available option online based on the user stories that we have, based on the past experience of someone else that came from a different background, that came from different, environment, culturally, religiously, and so on. But we accept it and we take it easily because this story sounds better. That's so.
It's what you want to hear, basically. It's the stories that you want to hear.
Usually they have a happy ending, right? The happy ending. People just pick up the happy ending and they pick up this choice and they apply it to themselves. And that's not necessarily the right way to doing. And also, in another case, it's basically called a lazy decision making. People, human beings, stop thinking. They stop integrating. They stop learning. The knowledge that they take, they accept the knowledge, but they don't process the knowledge. So, and later on now with whatever we have, internet become even bigger, right? AI start taking over. That's completely changed our cognitive functions, the way how we as a society operate, how we read, how we write, how we communicate, how we express our thoughts. AI influences to the point that we are no longer that everyone will agree. We don't read more than one page because we cannot focus, we cannot concentrate, right? We cannot calculate in our head, right? We cannot we geographically confused. We don't operate without the navigation system, right? We also have a huge issue with communication, right? We write beautifully now, but we don't write by ourselves. No one now writes by themselves. How many times we use all of the assisting tools to check our grammar, to check the flow of our conversation, to check the argument of our conversation. So that means we are diminishing our ability to even write. But then the worst problem that happens, people cannot articulate their thoughts. They cannot communicate. We can text, right? We can say how we heard over the text, but we cannot even talk on the phone and even face to face. And you realize, because we mostly communicate online no matter what, and most of us working remotely, especially in this developed world, right? We talk about the digital gap between the developed and developing countries, and in the developed world, we actually work online, right? And that's even worse because we can talk through the camera, but with the camera, we'll never express our innermost feelings, how we were able to do it in a person-to-person communication. And that creates humongous pressure on us as a human being. We're losing this ability to communicate and express thoughts and emotions. And that creates further and further, side effects that we can also talk. And then there are examples of this ADHD with kids, right? Or some sort of loneliness with older people, or depression is on the rise. Yeah. And that's all correlated and all connected. So to kind of circle back on my journey, that's how I work on the decision-making side. And that's why I was so in love with my research, to see how it's impacted people. But as I started my conversation, I was also so confused why the theory never been applied in practice. And that's why I basically ran in parallel my academic journey with my practical world, right? Because I wanted to see, research is one thing. Yes, we can theorize it, but in a practical world, it's still a machine, right? It's still operating on a different kind of foundational blocks. And there are different flaws that I also was excited about. Technology implementation, how the big technology systems, when we implement, and how they impact the worker's life, right? And in this case, allowing them to have more efficiency. Sometimes it's true, and as we know, most of the time it's not necessarily true. However, the processes needs to change. The behavior of humans needs to change. And what are the essential components for this technology implementation? And basically, most of my career, I focus how we implement technology to the organization, different type of technology, because the technology is changing with the speed of, with the speed of wind, right? So I always implement different technology, but the foundational blocks are the same kind of things. And that's what I've been also fascinated about. So that's basically my journey. That's what I do. And in my free time, I try to understand how society works and how people make decisions. And I'm not saying I'm the best example of making decisions. I look a lot into biases, human biases, different type of, especially how we make decisions and how they impact us. And then my kind of more professional world, into the more heavy implementation, heavy projects, and how we can do it more smoothly, and whether any of the projects goes as per plan, but it's none of them is what basically.
Yeah, well, it's the case. But wow, I mean, Jesus, this is so you chose like the hardest job in the world, right? Like trying to understand people. Like this is something that my wife and I, and even again even the guests here, like we always talk about society and how people behave and why do they behave like that. It's strange.
Yeah, and sometimes you can. You do the hypothesis, you discuss about people's behavior, and then you look at yourself and you're like, gosh, I wrote books about the decision making, right? And I look at my decision and it's like, where is your decision came from? Like, how did you make your decision? Even all of the process, even all of the biases, we still as a human beings are so irrational, right? Yeah. That our decisions sometimes so influenced, and again, they're so influenced by AI, they're so influenced by certain factors we don't even know, and now they really sad things that they get manipulated, right? Previously, they got manipulated by just your society groups where you've been born, your village, and so on. But now it's got manipulated because you live in this echo chamber. Your information gets filtered, and that's what is really some people don't understand and don't. In the spur of a moment, you just go with the flow.
So is it basically, because this is kind of fascinating, because on one side it sounds like it's human nature to be the way we are, the way you've described it, in terms of us being in what I like to describe it, we like to be in the comfort zone, so we like to hear the stories that kind of make sense to us, whether whether it's accurate or not, but we like to it's about focusing on what we want to hear rather than what we need to hear. So but then now obviously, in fact, we live in a world where, or rather, we had this transition that social media basically pushed this and exacerbated this a lot further. And now we're approaching into a period where technology now, effectively with AI, is influencing human behavior. So I'm just thinking, because there's always that debate that I'm sure you hear about this. It's like, oh, technology made things better or worse. Or people make things better or worse. So to me, I'm just wondering, because it here is like, is it people that influence technology over time, or has technology somehow influenced people over time, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a definite technology has been so. Technology is a production of the human beings, right? We design and we produce technology, right? The way how we did it and what for is the different questions. And in some cases, we design certain technology that make us so comfortable, right, that we don't want to get out from this bubble. And that's the problem. Me and you, if we will have a conversation, you can be frank with me, I can be frank with you, right? We can say what we don't like, because you have different opinion, I have different opinion. We might not necessarily like our opinion, but at least you will provide some uncomfortable truths to me, right? Which I might accept, might not accept. Technology, in all of the AI assistants, in all of the networks and the information flow that we have, they will keep you in a comfortable bubble. And that's their job. And that's how we design them, right? Because there is a saying that opposite attracts, right? Actually, no, opposite does not attract. We only attract people that have the same biases. We live with the people who often have similar biases, similar habits. They're just shown in a different way. But
we see it on social network with politics. It's like people pretty much, there's more division than ever before. Yeah,
I don't know, like based on the US election, right? If you will not be hanging out with a group who is supporting Trump, but you are supporting Harris, for example. That's the US world right now. You will be hanging out, but they will not be your friends. So you connect the biases. It's like a magnet. In the same way as the technology, we live in a comfortable world. No one wants to come out from this comfortable world. Why there is a race of all of those online tools where you have AI friends, where you have AI girlfriends, and so on, is because it's comfortable. who wants to hang out with the person now who is against your view, who wants to teach you, who wants to tell you that you are wrong, right? Like, for example, we're sure in partnerships, right? Husband or wife, doesn't matter. They always will point you out on things you're not doing well. It's especially with life you're living together, it's always about the things that you're not doing well, not about the things you're always doing good, right? But in a perfect, comfortable technology, right, you will never have a partner like that. You will have a partner who will only highlight your best parts. So that's why even on those AI psychologist tools, right, on the apps, the way how they design is to keep the person comfortable, is to keep the person in the same zone. And it might be useful for some of the organizations, it might be useful for some of the companies to keep the people on where they have to be, right? When we talk about it, why the media keeps us filling us with sort of the information, because it needs to fill us with certain of the information. It's sometimes excessive information is dangerous for us, right? Or society or the group see that the humanity does not need this sort of truth. That's the problem that we're facing with the technology. That's what used to be previously, historically, right? The information was filtered. You would live in a different bubble, and now we say that with the internet we have so much access to information, we can find the truth. But the problem is, because there's so much information, it's basically impossible to find the truth. There is too many truths now out there available that you actually
alternative facts, right?
The facts, what to believe. And this comfortable zone, not that many people are aware of that. And then if the people are aware of that, they don't want to get out of it. It's the same as becoming comfortable to proofread your emails, right? It's becoming comfortable not to use GPS and not to use your memory, like no matter what. This is becoming just so comfortable, but the effect, we don't think about the effect of this and diminishing of our cognitive skills. And for example, what's happening with our memory, right? It's called like there is a new name for this, is a digital amnesia, because we don't practice our kind of the brain cells in terms of the memory, right? We don't have this capacity anymore, because our capacity is so distributed on looking at so many colorful pictures is one extent, right? Because we're scrolling the news, we're scrolling the updates, that we don't have this capacity to focus on anything and actually remember anything. And that's for us, and that's becoming uncomfortable for us. It's becoming uncomfortable to read, to remember something, to learn something, to learn new language. And there are lots of advocates might come and say, why do we need to learn new language now? When do we have this all online translation tools? When now I can pick up the phone and call someone in China and we can have a perfect conversation and understand each other, right? And it's a valid argument. You're saving the time because you can use it on something else. However, what that is doing to your kind of the brain grows, the brain activity. And that's something more to discover by science, because it's not been that many years for the people to know the outcome, what type of human beings we will become. And for us to also say what skills we should forget, right? Like, for example, how to make a fire in the woods, right? We basically, probably most of us don't know now, and we don't want to have these skills. So it's also for us to decide whether we want to keep some of the skills or we want to just, to take them away. And we say, you know what, I don't care about the, learning geographical south, north, and so on. I have the GPS. I don't want to even focus on that. I don't want to learn the mathematical formulas anymore, because everything's been calculated and everything can be found. So I think that it's our individual responsibility to decide what we want to keep, what we want to keep for our kids, and what we say, it's no longer needed for us.
Wow.
So that's scary. That sounds scary, right? But you also understand it's scary, but at the same time we're evolving, right? We lost so many skills on our way, right? When the machinery came, when the TV came, radio came.
Well, that's what I was about to ask, because
we lost digital, it, right? So some of the skills we're gonna lose.
But that's the thing, because I mean, I can even speak for myself. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the world pre-internet, right?
To be honest, I also remember I didn't have an internet growing up until age 12, probably.
Yeah. But also, I mean, I used to remember phone numbers of everybody, like my parents' home, my friends, everything. And now I can barely remember my own mobile number, let alone somebody
Fair enough.
else's. And it's kind of became a
Yeah.
habit. So now, I mean, this interesting term, digital amnesia, because what happens if it impacts, people of our generation, where, you would think, okay, because we had the quote unquote old skills, right? Digital amnesia really impacted our memory, and now we even don't remember that anymore. So what happens to the younger generation who never experienced the old way? They grow up with TikTok, right? They grow up with social media. They grow up, and now, of course, even the younger generation, right? Like growing up with AI. So what does that mean for their cognitive development? I mean, is there any risk that their cognitive development will become, somewhat, it will definitely be different. It would be very different from our cognitive development as children. But is it going to be better in a certain way technologically? But then does that mean that they become more sort of ignorant to facts and ignorant to the realities of the world because they were never aware of the realities in the first place?
And I think that's actually goes a bit, in my view, that goes a bit more deeper into the societal classes and education.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realized or not how popular it is now to have all of these digital detox programs, which are becoming more
Yes.
and more expensive, right?
Yeah.
Which just basically means
Even though they can be for free, in my opinion, but yeah.
yeah. We're coming back to our childhood time, right, where we learn the basic skills, how to talk, how to introduce ourselves, how to talk to our neighbors, right? So we learn those skills. So what's happening is the upper class is actually having those knowledge that we're losing these cognitive skills, right? And they're trying their best to recreate these physical activities back into their life. They have their private tutoring, like I'm talking about if the upper class is raising the kids, for example, they have private tutoring, they have private doctors, their kids are playing on the grass, on their back, they go to school, physical school, and so on. We're talking about developed, not developing countries, right? Which is still operate in the probably in a different level, right? They try to bring this physical real life experience to the core of bringing their kids, right? The organic produce, the farms, the animals, all of sort of things, the physical interaction, private schools, physical schools. But then we have the middle class, right, where the mother and father are working and they not necessarily can spend time with the kids, learning things, experiencing things. They have to outsource this activity to the technology, right? The digital nannies assistant. They start lacking some of the stuff, right? I mean, they start, of course, we cannot not to bring technology to the world of our new generation because they have to, they born in that, right? They have to excel in that, right? But they start missing out on some of the certain cognitive skills that we describe in terms of even the emotional intelligence or even those human interaction, the easy human interaction. It's harder and harder to interact with people, right? It's basically impossible. It's becoming impossible for us to interact with strangers, and making friends, it's not that easy, especially for the kids now. They have more online friends than they have physical friends. Did you have, like even now you have probably some online people you can interact, but you would never call them online friends, right? It's like, oh, my online buddy, right? No, but they actually call their friends, online friends, as friends. So there is a different definition, change of the definition as the world change. So the middle class is one thing, right? They have to outsource it. They are missing out on something. And then there is the third layer, right? That actually have no choice of interaction to have physical proper interaction. They operate, if they have access to the internet, they have to operate only online. And that's where they don't know about the information filtering, and that's where they become living in the echo chambers of societies, right? Where they suck by the information, they believe in the information that is provided online and so on. And it's also danger to the society. And these people are easily can be manipulated. Everyone can be easy manipulated, but there is a correlation with the education and easy manipulation. Something to think about it. The people who get easy manipulated are the ones who lack some sort of knowledge, information, support group, physical interaction and physical presence and psychological stability. And this is all correlated factors. Of course, we always will have someone from, good prosperous environment that does not necessarily psychologically safe, but quite often we can see that there are other factors that impact the psychological state of people.
Well, that's what we've seen actually during the pandemic. It's pretty much this, in my opinion, relentless attack on the middle class, in my opinion. It's like how
the middle class suffers the most, right?
The most, yeah. And for the first time, probably in history, or at least modern history, because it was always the working class that have been attacked, relentlessly, which I think is horrible. But then, to me, it feels like as if, during the pandemic, they thought, well, okay, we completely sucked up the poor and the working class dry. Okay, now we're going to move to the middle class and try and drag as much money out of them as possible, wealth and everything. And because I have seen reports, for example, that there's a pretty much an explosion and in the rise of things like depression and loneliness, which before used to be attributed to the working class because they're poor and they didn't have basically the points that you've just made. Because of that, the digital inequality that we're seeing around the world and in the West as well. So, people who can afford the fancy tech and living in nice houses, etc., for them, it's easier. It becomes like a complementary or sort of facilitator of relationships, whatever. But for the working class or the poor people, that's pretty much their life, and there's nothing else beyond that, and it's quite dangerous. But we're seeing that in the middle class today, which is very interesting as well.
So, and we are also, we can say we are representing the middle class, right?
Yeah.
And because we also have this access to information, we see how the upper class living. And now we used to have our neighbor John, right, that would show something up, a new car, right? But we would know his situation, how he made it to the new car, and we would say, okay, he worked hard or whatever it is. But now we go online and we see that everyone's got a new flashy car, everyone's got a new flashy house. The house is getting bigger and bigger, but it does not mean the society is getting happy. And everyone goes on these luxurious vacations and holidays. And usually you, as the middle class person, you sit and it's like, well, I cannot afford it, right? I cannot do it. And it's more, but the problem is, it seems like that everyone around you affords more, does more, have more money than you. And that's, then you start working harder and harder to make those money, and you're using different type of ways. And then it's becoming endless run. And then you burn out, right? And then you forget about the implications of, connections with people, how to work with loneliness, right? How to be bored, because ability to be bored it seems to be, you cannot be bored. You cannot have nothing to do on your list. But actually, this is the foundational things. Like, back in the days, we would wake up, we would have things to do, but we would not say that's a plan of actions for today. So there are things that start impacting people in the middle class in this rush to be better than my neighbor. But you have so many neighbors online now that you don't even know those neighbors, right? And the way how they showcase their life, it's a massive impact on your state.
And as a result of that, you get because there is, this pattern started to evolve mostly on Instagram, especially in fitness influencers, right? So where I can't remember which...
it impacts the kids, right?
Absolutely, and exactly. Girls, especially.
We probably, I don't know, if you have your kids go to school, but how many of those new apps are getting created that you can actually troll the kids behind the back, and those type of things. The technologies that's supposed to be good are becoming evil technology, right? And they suffer, right? Because the opinion of their online friends becoming more important than the opinion of the physical friends, because they build this online world, this digital identity. For them, the digital identity is so important. For us, it's also important, like as a professional people, but probably me and you, we see this digital identity as just a professional picture. That's for me to just, get outside on a professional network, but they see the digital identity is their entire life.
And that's dangerous, isn't it?
It's extremely dangerous because, it's a new wave, right? It's will be evolved. Will be new regulations, compliance, and tools will be coming in place that it will be more structured. But for now, it's a chaotic behavior. But they have no choice, right? If all of their friends, they don't hang out in the park, they hang out online, that's where they need to have a persona. And they're building their persona, and their persona can be easily compromised by someone else's persona, which is again not real. So it's really blur. But we're talking about this example, but it also happens in the professional world as well. You go to LinkedIn every day and you see the people there, the professional persona, but you know them in the real life as well. And you're like, and what we have, did you realize even on LinkedIn, on professional network for professional people, it's all appraises. Yeah. It's all successes. And you see, and you only can think about it as everyone is so hardworking, so achievable, so great at what they do. Is it possible? Is it even possible to be a star of everything? So it's a pressure. It's a machine, yeah. And not everyone can understand. But I don't think people even have time to process, to understand how dangerous it is for them, for their family, because they need to compete in this environment, and that's the middle class.
So, who is maybe blame is not the right word, but because usually people talk about the evolution, the digital evolution, with the rise of the internet and, the iPhone, etc. But everything that you've mentioned thus far, it's 100% linked to social media. And I'm just wondering, let's say if social media did not exist, just hypothetically, right? Would any of these problems exist still today, do you think? These because even before social media, you probably remember as well, there were forums. Remember, there were forums and things like that. Yeah,
also that's also social media chats, right? We started all with MSN chats.
With chats and yeah.
And then it was forums, and then it was online social networks. Yes, but it was.
But they were not as impactful though. They didn't really. It's like they still created groups. I mean, I remember there were like groups and people.
But it's also the creation of your physical environment. That's how it started. We started recreating our physical world into our online world, but online world expanded beyond the physical world, the physical abilities.
But social media kind of made that worse. Is it more like, because it's more about like how, like the question I guess I'm asking is like, is social media exclusively responsible for dragging so many people into that rabbit hole that basically made them, basically turning something like X into their own world? It's like, for example, like because I follow American politics, and I see a lot of interesting commentators, like when they go to look at somebody like JD Vance, and you could tell the guy lives on X. It's like he doesn't know life beyond X, right? So it's like he appeals to the sort of people who are on X, but if you take him outside the world of X, the guy doesn't know how to communicate. And you could say, I watch his speeches, I'm like, this guy's supposed to be potentially might become the vice president.
So we get a fragmented speech now because we cannot talk. Because we got used to read only 140 characters, right, on X or something like that. And only text, so we don't know how to articulate our thoughts.
Exactly.
That's a big thing. Or we don't know how to have a decent honest discussion, because the only thing we got used to talk over dinners now is appraisal of ourselves. The same how we appraise ourselves on LinkedIn, the same how we appraise ourselves on Instagram, with the new dress, with the new, new house, new additions that comes to our family, new travels, right? It's all about the appraisal now. Really rare you come to the discussion at the dinner with your friends and someone will break down in tears and say, I have that, I have credit card debts, I have relationship issue, and so on. It's extremely rare. It's only happens one-on-one with the really deepest friend, and it's even that now becomes abnormal.
Yeah, it's embarrassing
because no one wants to be friends with the sad people. Everyone wants to be friends with the successful people. So, but that's again the societal thing. The societal change. I don't think we always can blame the technology for this. I don't think we should be blaming the social media or blame anything, because we also have to bring we have to be realistic in terms of how much good this brought to the world, no matter what. In terms of, I think it's we don't know what is more good or bad, right? But in terms of the benefits, it's tremendous benefits that the social media and the internet and the technology brought to our world, right? So we cannot blame it completely, but I also personally think that's the way how we change. And that's why I talk about we shouldn't be always relying on big organization and on the government to control and govern those tools and technology and filter the information. It's our responsibility to know that those tools can potentially bring danger. The only thing is probably would be good that those organizations and those kind of institutions provide some sort of more easily transparency for us, for basic human beings to understand. For example, when we talk about AI regulations and responsible AI, I don't know about you, even I am in this world, right? But it's pretty difficult to understand all of this AI acts and everything in responsible AI and all of those technologies that come out and all of the disclaimers that come out. I never can understand how dangerous it is for me and what is the terms and conditions and how much information do they actually take from me. For me, it's really difficult. I have to spend probably days to read all of the terms and conditions, right? And all of the potential side effects, and probably all of these organizations are transparent, but they make it so difficult to understand for us what the potential impact of the technology, because so far with all of the Gen AI tools, none of this, yes, we hear some snippets in the media that it might be dangerous, but no one actually came and outlined, how you read description on the medicine, the potential side effects, right? No one ever wrote those potential side effects and said the potential side effects can be, if it's excessive use, more than 5 hours per day, maybe depression, it might be loneliness or whatever it is, right? We don't have those. And I think that's might be a part of the thing why we're getting confused and why we're going into this rabbit hole, because we don't understand how, now we can see some of the research, but we don't understand how Instagram, LinkedIn, and all of the things can actually impact us in our psychological state.
Yeah. I know. I think, to be honest with you, because I as an entrepreneur, I was part of that that world.
Yeah, we're all part of it, right? And I've worked with that. And I think for me, for every day, if you ask me to remove some of the tools that I have on every day, in my case, auto-generated emails and stuff like that, I will tell you, hold on a second. No, don't. That's my life now. None of us making notes of the meetings anymore, right? I don't want this back at the days come back. I don't want to make meeting notes anymore, right? Things like that. So I don't want some of the tools to be removed then, because someone will come and say, well, but you will be better at communicating, or you will be better at memory. I will be saying, no, that's fine.
No, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. I think because I did a video where I was looking at why I believe that we're moving more towards the AI dystopia rather than utopia. Not because I'm selling I'm not falling into that hype. It's like, oh my God, AI will destroy humanity, like some people did. But the argument I'm making, which is the reason why I am sort of a frustrated entrepreneur, and in fact, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this podcast in general, is that we actually have the technology to achieve AI utopia. But we are moving into dystopia out of choice. I feel that, to me, it feels like it's out of choice. Or maybe as you described, it's like, the upper class, they wanted to move towards dystopia because for them it's not going to be dystopia. They'll be fine. For the rest of us, it will be dystopia.
Yeah, don't forget because technology is also expensive, and they are the only one who can operate the technology, and they're the only one who actually benefit from that. But yeah, my question would be, who wants AI utopia? Who wants it? Who
would benefit from it?
Who would benefit from that?
Yeah. Well,
that's the question. And when we talk about the digital divide also between the people in the society, the question is, who wants to break this digital divide? This digital divide, the society gets controlled and managed by groups, right? And it's been historical like that, right? In all of the history, even in the Greek times and Rome times, right? That was the different groups were easy to manipulate and to control. And we living in exactly the same scheme, right? We have different groups, and different groups get controlled and managed by different authorities.
But then,
and for some, needs additional access to information. For others, there's access to the information. Certain the information should be shut down.
But that's where governments really need to play a role, surely. I mean, they have to say, well, when I say governments, I mean like the global community.
Isn't it the government are the one who is actually managing it?
Well, in theory,
why do we expect from them to do so many things when they have different interests?
Yeah. Well, they're benefiting from it, obviously, certainly for the misinformation campaigns, etc. They absolutely benefit from it.
There are certain groups that benefit. Even we benefit from something that others do not have access to. And we benefit from some of the societal gaps, right? But they shouldn't be. We cannot always say they should be doing or put the responsibility on them. It's also it's impossible.
No, I mean in terms of the infrastructure.
Because they also operate on their own agenda.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, obviously, I mean, that's the thing, because obviously as individuals, we are responsible in terms of how we choose to use technology. And, I would even argue it is our responsibility to try educate ourselves, not to rely on other people to educate us. But then that kind of takes us back to the point that you made at the beginning of this conversation, like, human nature is that we kind of follow what other groups of humans are doing, that because it's what makes us feel better, etc. But I'm thinking, at least like from the infrastructure perspective, right? Like, for instance, like in poorer countries, who's going to build data centers there that would benefit their local community? Well, not going to be the VCs in Silicon Valley. Then surely the government would need to do it. But then governments are corrupt. So
in this case, and we know there are good example of the big organization and the government that try to bring them to kind of bring the gap closer, to provide the technology and provide ICT to people in the remote areas, people in need, for the people in countries in need. Yes, there are certain efforts being done. That's why we're talking about the technology also help us in a lot of ways, right? Providing education to people, to kids, to people who are in different type of remote zones. So education becomes more accessible, healthcare becomes more accessible, right? I mean, yes, it's not the same as physical interaction, right? But at least it's something. So this is the first steps in the education. It's not the best way of interacting, but it's something that can bring people to a different level. So we cannot undermine this at all. But also, I do want to bring you an example. When we talk about the digital divide, right, there is 33% of population does not have access to the internet, right? 33, that's basically one of the third. So what does it mean? That the data that we have as part of the Gen AI is lacking 33% of representation. So the data that we have in our world that we're operating in all of the social media and online, it's completely biased, right? It's completely, it's not a full representation of the society as the world. That's one thing. But even so, we have this, 67% that has the internet. How many countries out of this percentage is actually filtering the internet, filtering the information? And we have huge component like China. We have some of the components in India that the information, the internet, the ACT might be provided, but how restricted it is. And come on, even the US, right? What is some of the information is not restricted? Definitely it's restricted. And some of the providers probably banned, right? That we don't know. From one perspective, it needs us to be, because otherwise different societal groups will create the dangerous community that will be impacting the society. That's correct. But in the same side, there is something that is not supposed to be seen by us. And there are many countries that are restricting access to the information. So once again, on what data are we operating? On this upper and middle class data of those fragmented societal groups. So the data that we use is completely biased. So we cannot also, comes back to this biased technology. We cannot say, first of all, we build it. We created it, so it's based on our bias. We cannot blame AI to be biased. But at the same time, the data that we're feeding it is so fragmented, so unstructured, is so unrepresentative of us as a humanity. So we cannot take it as a source of truth.
Absolutely. And that's why I call out quite a lot of the AI companies, where they basically say, yeah, well, yeah, you can actually trust our AI. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're not telling us how you train the data. How did you train your models? Oh, no, we're not going to tell you that. So then you can't say you trust it, right? It's impossible.
And that's another thing, right? Side effects of us using certain tools or apps or the technology, we don't know those side effects. No one says to us, yes, as you said, there's like the data has been trained on certain people of that age, of that gender, of that geographical disparity and stuff like that. We don't know, we don't understand. So if us as a humans, if we're talking about solutioning, if us as a humans at least could track back on how the tool was designed, created, and how this solution that provides to us been calculated and managed, so it came up like that would be probably be easier for us to accept. We will accept it anyway because it's the easy choice, but at least it will bring a bit of more awareness and transparency into our life.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, talking about that, because now I'm wondering if you're seeing that from your end as well, especially working for Microsoft, that people are starting to see AI from the negative perspective. So even though in the last couple of years there's a lot of excitement about Gen AI, and people still use Gen AI in a big way, but now when you the term AI now is associated with crapness, basically, right? So it's like you don't hear people say, "Oh, this is AI generated, that means it's amazing." It's the exact opposite. So now people seem to be losing a lot of trust in anything that is AI generated or anything that is based on AI, which is kind of interesting because, companies like Microsoft, they jumped on this early. But Microsoft, I think they've been, they've managed the PR side of it pretty well compared to maybe Google. But I'm actually more interested to see how Apple going to do it, because obviously Apple now jumped in head first into Apple Intelligence. And obviously they're pushing it that it's going to be much more positive because it's the Apple way, blah, 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 blah. But that was like a few months ago when that mistrust in AI was not as bad as it is today. And I'm interested to see what's going to happen once Apple Intelligence is out there on the iPhone. Will people be like, oh, yeah, I definitely want to buy this thing? Or will be like, actually, no, I'm going to buy the older models of the iPhone because I don't want any of this AI stuff. So I'm do you see that at your end? Because I'm seeing from my end that there's more and kind of a rise mistrust of AI than ever before. And there's even a report that I saw, I can't remember what it's called, but I will put the link in the description for the listeners, where now consumers, they don't want AI. It's like they effectively, I think I'm paraphrasing, but the title was something along the lines that by using the term AI in your product or service, you are actually deterring consumers from using your product and service, which is like, whoa, okay. So that's kind of, it's backfiring now, it seems. So I'm just wondering, is that a good thing or a bad? For business it's not, but
different things that comes to my mind, right? First of all, if we talk about just business and the organizations, right? Definitely was lots of hype, and there is lots of hype still on AI. And again, you bring the big examples of the big companies who can afford to have the technology like AI, right? They can build in-house, they can hire the people externally. But there are lots of organizations that run on profit and loss, right? And they quite more safer on playing on those technologies. They sometimes say, what those AI tools, what is the ROI on those AI tools? And it's really difficult to quantify. So they will go with more traditional tested technology that they know will help them to succeed in business. However, those organizations also know that they have to step in order to stay competitive. They have to test it, they have to try, because the first mover disadvantage, not the advantage, it's always going to be faulty, right? And it's never going to be work. And now we're still in the first mover disadvantage for those technology. It's not excel properly, but those companies, They still try to compete. They have to step in. Otherwise, they will lose the momentum. They have no choice, right? They have to invest. Maybe probably they will lose the money on those technology. But they have to train the employees, because now the employees expect to have AI in their workforce. Everyone expects some sort of assisting technology. They want to work for those companies that actually provide those assisting technology, right? No one wants to work for the company that's still doing everything on paper and do scanning. So that's one of the things. So in terms of the investment, they're trying to be smart. They're not necessarily jumping straight away on that, obviously, right? But at the same time, to stay competitive, they have to test, they have to try, they have to make sure that the people that are working for them knows how to operate those technologies. Otherwise, they will not survive. In terms of again, this AI as the brand became so kind of low level brand. Yes, correct. Because every single startup now has AI powered technology, right? Is becoming stupid in terms of, not necessarily stupid is such a strong one, but komish, right? That everyone knows how to use AI, and even some people does not even know how to build the model and how to run the model and how to train the data, but they know the definition of AI and everything is AI. So that's another thing. I agree with that. From one perspective, you look at that as like at every single company that comes with AI, you look at it with a bit of skepticism, right? There are some who make it, 1% that make, and 99% that fail, right? Especially in my environment and where I live in California, everyone is like that. So that's probably what I will say. But at the same time, you have no choice. You have to adapt, and kind of try to make it work. And as a person who works for the company, I have to kind of train myself on the using of those technology. And the only thing I can control my personal life. But in some ways, it's assistive technology. In some ways, I decide what I need and what I don't need to one extent. But it's a bit. I would not say it's necessarily that negative perspective on this, but it is a perspective with a caution for the people who is a bit more aware of what's happening with the big organization at one extent. And once again, in terms of the digital divide and the economical power, right? There are certain societal classes that won't be able to afford the human-to-human communication. Like now, customer service through the chatbots, right? Only certain level will be afford this personalization, right? Banking, right? You have the premium banking and you have standard banking. Standard banking now goes through the online chats and AI assistant. The premium banking, you go and you see the person, or this person calls you on the phone. This is the difference. That happens in every single services, right? Customized services now. Like now we sit with the providers, the telecom providers, the energy providers. We sit for hours. We just want to speak to a person to explain the issue, because if we want to explain it with the machine, it doesn't work. In some cases, it's actually getting better and better. It's getting better in terms of the customer support in communication with the chatbots. It's getting better. But still, that's again, it's an economical decision. It's becoming too expensive to have this extreme customized solutions, and only certain societal classes will be able to afford it.
See, that's interesting, because effectively it's becoming more expensive to do things the old way.
It's becoming
which used to be free.
The same as organic food, right? It's becoming more expensive. It's becoming more trendy to eat healthy, to eat basic things, to eat healthy, and to grow health stuff. And it's becoming more fashionable.
Yeah. Even though it's cheaper, in theory, it's actually organic is actually cheaper than the manufactured stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it should be, but it's no, it's fascinating
but I'm telling you, if you go to the supermarket, right, you see organic and non-organic, and it's based on your societal class and income level, right? Yeah. Organic sometimes costs double, triple, right? And you, as the homemaker, right, you just cannot afford. The same as will be with the services, and that's what's happening now. And that's actually the paradox of the digital divide. It's not sometimes that you cannot afford, the technology is not provided to you, that you don't have access to that. It's actually that you have so much access, so now you have to go to the back door and do the traditional ways that becoming more expensive.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's a cycle, it seems. So basically, yeah, it is. It's like a continuous sort of symbiotic, kind of weird symbiotic relationship with machines and humans, in the sense that now we kind of are we kind of like everything you just said kind of got me thinking. Are we sort of reaching a point where we're becoming sort of more, I suppose, nostalgic to the old ways? I mean, is that why we even see that in politics,
I think
for example?
it's also the societal change, right? Do you remember your grandparents, when would you go to their house and they would run things in an old way, and they would tell you back in days, you would be, by that age, you will be already working in the field, and me at your age, I was already making money and things like that. So I think that's actually the example of exactly this historical, change that's happening with us, right? And once again, now being in the farm it's a luxury, right? Having a country house, growing your vegetables, it's like that actually means you made it in life from one perspective, because you have a house, you have time to grow the vegetables, and you can enjoy those vegetables, right? That's a big deal. But once again, that's exactly the same, right? That's just in a different picture.
Well, as I tell people that I live in the countryside, sort of out of London, right? And people were like, I remember 20 years ago, because I don't like moving much. Like we found, my wife and I were very fortunate with our business, etc., whatever. We done it when we were quite young. Like when we moved into that small town in the countryside, the general reaction at the time, and we're talking, like I said, actually less than 20 years ago, it was like, what? It's so unsophisticated. We should be in London, blah, 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 blah. I live in exactly the same place now. When I tell people I live in the countryside, ooh.
You made it.
Amazing. You made it. I'm like, I'm in the same place.
Yeah, but
so that's quite fascinating.
The perception change. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So that's the case. And now it's the same as kind of with, there are different influences coming up in terms of being a home mother, for example. That's also becoming something like, wow, you can afford it. Like, you have this sort of like, you can actually afford to be a mother at home.
Yeah.
There are different societal like wars on this mothers at home, right? But it's also becoming a luxury thing.
Wow.
So anyway, in my way, how I see it, it's an evolution. And we living through this evolution, our kind of next generation will be living through even a different evolution, right? And that's just different generation, different times, different like changes. We have to accept it. We have to adopt the things, and kind of just have some sort of barriers within our own life that we decide, yes, that works for me, and something doesn't work for me. Some things I'm going to lose, but something I'm going to keep, as for example, like the family communication, expression of emotion, thoughts, writing abilities, if it's important for you. If it's not important for you, then lose it. What it makes you, but the facts that the depressions are rising, loneliness are rising, it's difficult to make friends, and so on. The suicidal rates are going up, the ADHD with kids is going up. It's also things to consider. But once again, I will tell you, back in the days, it was exactly the same, but different diseases were coming up, or different societal issues.
So where do you see the evolution moving into now? I mean, how will it evolve now? Because it's kind of interesting. Because, like I said, on one side, technologically, we're more advanced than we've ever been.
Yeah,
but socially, we want to go backwards. I mean, I think you can see that now. I mean, like but of course, going backwards has different definitions. I mean, like when you see in politics, you see for example, the ultra conservatives that want to go all the way back to the 1950s, and you've got sort of the non-ultra conservatives that they say, well, actually, we don't want that much technology. We just want normal family values again, et cetera, et cetera. But then, of course, you've got the opposite side of that they don't want any technology, that they want a more just society, et cetera. I mean, all of these arguments are somewhat valid, whether you agree with them or not. But I'm seeing, like, it seems like we kind of went through some kind of a big bang. Like everything kind of splattered on the wall. And now we're kind of trying to figure out what's going to stick. And it just seems to be random right now. I mean, do you see it in that way?
I think we will not be able to stop what's happening now. It will be even better, faster, more exciting, more benefits will come in. I think the question is, how can we learn to make sure that technology does not control us and we actually grasp more benefits out of it? I think that's the fundamental question. Yeah. And I think the personal responsibility to manage our life and the use of technology. But I don't think, in my circle, I see that people try to spend more time together. But I think it's because we also know the old way. With the new generation, it's the influence. I mean, we will still have some sort of probably traditional ways of, learning and et cetera, will stick with them. But it's going to be different societal classes. It's going to be different countries. Different countries have different education system and so on. But we will not be able to stop it, for sure. We cannot fight against it. There is no point to fight against it. I think there is a point to learn how to use it better. There is a point to learn and talk about more the governance and compliance and the risks. And that's what's not happening. For the last year, we only talk about the benefits of AI, or benefits of Gen AI, but no one talk about it. Well, we have, and that's an interesting fact. I'm also struggling with that. We have some sort of, again, snippets of compliance and governance, but it's extremely difficult to touch, right? We all know the benefits in terms of like healthcare benefits, education benefits, and AI, financial benefits of AI, rate of investment on AI. But when we talk about those responsible AI and how to govern it and what implications can be, it's a bit fuzzy. And maybe it's just fuzzy for me. Maybe some people are quite clear on this. Yeah, we know that, that AI not necessarily that sort of like truthful and et cetera, but it's not really defined in my opinion, but I might be wrong.
Well, from my point of view, yeah, because that's obviously the work that we do with my company. But it's an opinion though. I think it's to do with the funding, because the problem that we have, and I actually had that discussion with Ida Tin in the previous episode, because she's also established tech entrepreneur. She strongly believes in ethics, etc. And the general conversation that we have is that we feel VCs who control the market. They do control the market. They have they have a lot of influence, a lot of financial power. They don't want to invest in anything to do with responsible AI or ethics. Not because they themselves are not ethical. I mean, I have to kind of emphasize that.
It's difficult to financially quantify.
It's very difficult to financially quantify. Like the way, the VCs that told me that directly, to them, it's like they know that building something that is responsible or ethical takes time. But what VCs want is an exit. They want a 3 to 5 year exit, right? Building ethical models or even defining ethical models, defining responsible models. It needs a lot of R&D. I mean, that's the work with my company.
And you cannot blame them for that.
You can't blame them, but at the same time, they should be held responsible for allowing companies to deploy AI models that are not safe.
For example, they should have a bucket of the money allocated specifically on this kind of non-profit organization, non-profit ideas or generation. Yes, in the ideal.
Well, that's where governments have to come in, though, right?
Over the governments, over the unions, I think there needs to be the institutions have to come in.
Absolutely, I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I meant earlier. That I feel, I see that there needs to be, when people talk about regulation. Certainly, when I talk about regulation, I'm not talking about having a stick and hitting the VCs or the tech companies on their heads. Right? That's not going to work. That never works. But I feel that there needs to be more of a carrot approach, in the sense that there needs to be an incentive. So yes, I appreciate that with investors, they want an exit, they need an exit, they can't, invest into a startup and then wait for 10, 20 years for something to emerge. I mean, that's just not, it's not good for them. It's not good for their LPs. Yeah. So there's got to be some kind of a government collaboration. So the government could, for example, incentivize VCs to invest in startups that actually want to prioritize ethics over profits, right? At least in the short term. So that then you kind of, because for example, in the UK, we have a scheme, which I think is a really good scheme. I took advantage of that in my previous startups where, because the UK, the investors here are very risk averse. There's nothing like in California, right? Although that has changed over time, but still, we're not, they're too scared of risk. So what the government introduced, which is really clever, is that, well, if you're an investor and you invest in a seed startup, right? Seed level startup, so 3 years or below, you will get massive tax breaks. So much that if you lose your money, you're actually going to get that money back through your tax breaks. So there's zero risk. And that actually opened up the flood of investors towards London that made London what it is in the world of tech. Though that's pre-Brexit. Let me emphasize that.
But that's why you guys were more pioneer on the responsible AI work, and exactly. As well as a number of responsible AI startups.
Yeah. I mean, we're a small community
because coming up first with this.
Yeah, I mean, because when we started out, in the Silicon Roundabout, when back in the day, it was very few of us. I mean, for example, it was myself with my tiny team. Well, with me, 3 people. Sort of next door to us was DeepMind, that they were still a tiny company. There were loads of other companies. Some of them eventually now they're part of Stable Diffusion and stuff. So it's a small, tight community that was just us. But as soon as that flood of investment started to come in, more and more startups started to emerge in the world of AI, responsible AI as well, and AI for biotech, science, development, things that are actually that normally investors would not go anywhere near. So that kind of created that opportunity. Now that's where I'm thinking, this is a really nice example of how, we need to incentivize investors to basically invest in startups that want to build something that has more long-term benefit. But the thing is, you've got to give it time. It's not something that, I mean, the reason why we don't have VCs in my company, because we said, you know what, we don't want to be controlled by anybody, to be pressured by anybody. We know what we need. We know what we want. We know it will take time. That's it. That's the deal, right? So that was it.
But you could afford it, right? To one extent.
To one extent, yeah. I mean, I'm in a privileged position, so yeah. But at the same time, it would have been nice if I had more funds as well.
I know. But still, they need VCs, yeah.
Exactly, no, absolutely, and I think that's the thing, because there's a lot of talent, and sort of actually, Ada made a great point. It's like, I know, she knows many other entrepreneurs, amazing talents, but the only reason they're not in the game because they don't want any VC funds, or rather VCs don't want to invest in them because it's not financially viable for them in the short term, right? And I think that's the problem. It's that short-termism obsession of profit. I think that is a problem. I mean, we need to have profit. I am a capitalist, by the way, so I believe in capitalism, but I also believe in responsible capitalism. I think that this is where, we talked about how society has changed over time, the technology has changed over time, but then the financial institutions that fund and control these things have not changed. I think that is the next change that needs to happen if we're to move towards any kind of utopia, whatever that means.
I mean, that's a good kind of, to finalize our discussion, that's a good kind of roadmap. It's a good mind map as well for those organizations and for the institutions to have in mind that there should be allocation for the goodwill. It's even, I think it says in the Bible that 10% of what you get, you have to give it to the people in need. And that's probably one of the things. The 10% of the profit you generate have to be spent on some sort of a good approach to the technology, on the education, on the learning, on the transparency, on showing them how technology actually works, because as we talk, we don't know.
Well, that's the thing.
It's the same as we don't know what is in our American food, right? From our perspective, it's the same. We don't know what is coming in our technology now. It's all the rubbish from all over the world, right? Yeah. As we talk about the data, what type of data is there, it's all there. And we basically just consume it.
Yeah,
We consume it every day, and it's harming us. The same as Instagram, the same as TikTok, the same as YouTube, the same as LinkedIn, right? It's harming us, and we don't even understand the impact it does on us. And even we, as a professional people, having a professional network, there are aspects that are harmful. There are hundreds of aspects that are extremely beneficial for us, but there is still something that might have a side effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as the final point, because obviously you work for Microsoft, which is obviously the leading figure in the world of AI today, and obviously the fact that Microsoft hired you at your position right now, the senior position that focuses on these areas that you've discussed, it says to me that Microsoft obviously is fully aware of all of the issues that you talked about. So because I presume, hopefully, Microsoft has the influence to define what the future looks like in terms of the world of tech, and it has a lot of influence in that, etc. And effectively, the way I see, whatever Microsoft does, I think everybody else tends to follow. Even Apple. I know Apple doesn't like the sound of it, but Apple does follow what Microsoft does. So, what is the future then, from this point of view? Like in terms of putting all of the points that we've talked about. What's the future?
From personal perspective. From personal side, I think will be, from personal and professional side, I don't think it will be only way forward. It's not going to be way backward. It will be more, from my perspective, will be more technology, more use of technology, and this assumption that it's built that it helps us in certain ways. And we will be using it more in every day, but I think we also will get smarter eventually. We'll also be more educated eventually, because it's becoming so much out there that the awareness is coming up. And once again, I'm talking about certain societal classes, right, that have this access to the internet, that have this access to the technology. And in this technology world, I'm only talking from my perspective, right? I cannot say about others, but in my view, in my life, we'll have more and more technology. But at the same time, I also will have certain areas where I will not have the tech involved. And we're becoming more and more aware of this. But that's in my way. I don't think that professionally we can stop, and I don't think we should be stopping. I think the more investment in the new things we have, from one perspective, the better it is. And the more we learn, and the more we stretch and responsible we are to stay competitive in this environment, also the better it is for us as the professional people. As from the personal perspective, I would separate it, and I would see different use of technology. For example, as I said, healthcare, one side we needed education, and one side we needed in the personal communication, psychological safety, emotional intelligence. That's something I would probably try to keep away and try to be more like a sacred space.
So there should be, I suppose, for part of the education system, there should be more push for soft skills, right? Like more.
The soft skills are so in demand and so lacking in every single, areas of our life. Yes, soft skills are becoming the one that we talk about, that we're providing more education for people to learn AI. I think we should be providing similar amount of funds and investment on people to learn the soft skills.
And what about Microsoft's point of view then? Is Microsoft...
I think from my perspective, from my experience, they do a lot. They definitely do a lot within their organization on both soft, cultural, and technology skills. From my perspective, as how I see it, it's a lot. There is a lot of tools and technology available that can benefit individuals. The way how the individuals use it, and whether they use it all, and whether they process all of the information, that's the responsibility of individuals. But from the company perspective, and it's not only Microsoft, actually, I can say exactly the same thing about Google, Amazon, AWS. I also used to be with the big consulting firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers. All of them are doing exceptionally well. It's a big word, but they're doing a lot for their employees. those big organizations, the one I faced in my career, in terms of the training, in terms of some sort of support how to take on technology, they provide lots of kind of tools and application, but it's not always individuals can get an advantage of it.
Well, that's the thing. The digital divide will continue.
The one thing and don't forget the companies and the individuals, they operate from different levels and they operate from different understanding. What the company can do is not necessarily meet the needs of every single employee, right? And that's really hard to understand. It can invest, it will provide the online education, right? But it's not necessarily going to provide this specific face-to-face trainings, as we talked about it, right? But from perspective what they do, all of these big firms, they try to bring the people on the learning curve.
Yeah,
that's what I see. They have the courses, different type of courses on responsible and ethical AI, on clean communication in the company, on harassment, on biases, and so on. So once again, the information is provided, but how it's been accepted and how it's been used is the different question.
Wow. Yeah. And of course, that doesn't even go anywhere near the problem of solving digital divide, because you believe it's going to get worse, right? I remember you told me before in our previous conversation.
For me, the digital divide itself will get worse, and it will be different sides of the digital divide: the social economical side, the actual digital divide between developed and underdeveloped world, and even the psychological, cognitive digital divide. Yes, these things will definitely be. In one aspect, AI can narrow it, technology can narrow it, but from one perspective, it's actually widening it in a different aspect that we didn't even expect. As now we talked about it, expensive human interaction.
I mean, I tried to kind of finish it on a positive note. Will this ever stop? Will the digital divide ever?
No, it's the same. The same as back in the days. It didn't stop. It's industrial revolution started and so on. It's never stopped. It's always progressing further and further. We just have to take it in a different aspect. No, and we don't want it to stop. Why do we want it to stop? Do we want to go back to the days? Yeah. Do we want to go back to this? Yeah.
No, I mean, when it comes to what I mean, like it's to provide more accessibility to those at a disadvantage, like to provide them with access to the technology so they can benefit from the technology. Kind of like because see, I mean, for me, the internet, even though you suppose some people could say that it could have contributed towards the creation of digital divide. But at the same time, the internet really has literally pulled hundreds of millions of people around the world out of poverty. So I'm just thinking,
exactly. So
when will be the point? No, I mean, so my question is, I guess, is when do you think, or will there be a point where technology will literally eradicate poverty? Like my naive thinking, I suppose.
I think it's still got too much benefits. It's still brought us a lot of things that we have to be appreciative of, and of course with every positive things there is a negative aspect that we have to navigate and walk around,
including obviously societal issues that actually,
of course, yes, and it used to be before
ensures
every single new machinery that came into the place. Yes.
Yeah.
That's part of life. That's what we're paying for.
Yeah. Well, I suppose on that note, because obviously there's so many things that you and I could talk about. I mean, like, as I say, I tell this to every guest that came, that, the conversation, we kind of look at one area, but there's so many, because of your expertise, there's so many areas that we can talk about. And I think we should have multiple episodes in the future where we can actually look at specific areas, because AI, well, the world of tech is a universe. Like, say, it's an endless universe, but even the world of AI itself is an endless universe. So even just this one conversation, I think it's just I gave the listeners and the viewers just a sort of a flavor, perspective of the complexity of human-machine interaction. I mean, it's not as simple as, you got access to tech, it can do this for you, boom, happy days. It's not that simple, is it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. All right. That's
all right,
good.
Valeria. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Well, my friends, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, a lot of very serious issues to consider, right? Digital amnesia. I mean, this is a problem. It's a problem that's been reported, by the way, for quite a long time. It's a problem that even people like myself, way back in the day, we're talking around maybe 2014, 2015, when I was already involved in AI pretty actively. And that was a period where we realized that, in fact, if we are to put AI models on the web through social media, etc., there will be some serious negative consequences if we don't put any guardrails. And some of us basically decided, you know what, let's just step away and kind of try and figure out how to do this safely, which eventually led, in my case, towards the buildup of my company, Nebulae. But other companies, like the social media platform, decided to quadruple down on it because, well, it's about enhancing your personalized ad experiences. Really? How did that go? Oh, yeah? We've got an explosion of mental health issues amongst children and indeed adults as well. Just to name one particular problem, you know, in case people thought it was not serious. I mean, again, let's not to mention misinformation. We've seen a lot of misinformation, toxic campaign in politics, in American elections, but all over the world as well, not just in America. We've seen it the same here in the UK. I mean, where do we go from here? Yes, I agree with Valeria about we need to, as individuals, take more responsibility, 100%, because, you know, everything is being reported and so on. I know not everybody kind of listens to the news, etc. This is the reason why I've got this podcast, because I want to inform you. I was part of that problem. As I always admit it, I was part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. I walked away from all of that world because I felt that in their mind, ethics and responsibility is kind of in the low list of priorities. They're not ignoring it. Of course, they're not going to say, oh, no, we don't want to be ethical. We don't want to prioritize your safety, although some probably do. However, it's not at the top priority. Why? Because as we have discovered, for example, with my company, when you build AI models with guardrails, it takes a long time to do. It's not something that you can just throw out there and it just works automatically. No, that doesn't happen. You have to do a lot of R&D work. You have to be patient and it takes time, which goes against the idea of trying to get something out there quickly and profiteer as much as possible. So yeah, you know, whatever happens to you, the user, whatever happens to your children, whatever happens to your mental health, your cognitive decline, whatever, who cares, right? That's the attitude. And I challenge anybody that would say to me that this is not how they think. And I also going to challenge some people because somebody actually said to me recently, oh, they have put guardrails for the past 10 years. You know, when back in 2014, we've identified the problem, they put guardrails. Well, if you put guardrails, how come things are getting worse? Yes, the AI is smarter. The tech is smarter and more powerful and more accessible. But how come the problems that we're seeing, as Valeria highlighted, is getting worse? That means you didn't put any guardrails, did you? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. But that's the reality. And the main reason as well I highlighted at the beginning of this episode that we recorded this video before the American elections. So we didn't know that Trump won, obviously, at the time, because it didn't happen. But now that we're moving towards a deregulated America, because it is going to happen. I did report this in this video over here about Project 2025. Some people even said to me, oh, Tim, this is just, you know, it's the Democrats try to scaremonger and there's no such thing as Project 2025. And even Trump himself is saying that he's not going to be doing Project 2025, yada, yada, yada. Where are we now? Yet now we're approaching the end of November 2024. Look at the people that he surrounded himself. Look at what's going on right now. You tell me, are they not doing Project 2025? Yes, they are. Okay. So we're going to see some very aggressive deregulation. Now, whether it will work or not, I don't know. Of course, we'll have to wait until 2025 to see. But the problems that Valeria highlighted, I mean, the key reason why I'm mentioning this, because everything that Valeria highlighted is with the existing regulations. So imagine if you remove these regulations, what's going to happen, right? Are we all going to turn into zombies or something? I don't know. It's crazy. So that's why I have this podcast. I want to have this conversation. I want to inform you because it's so important that we take responsibility. Like, for example, with my company, we're not waiting for regulation. We made a decision that we want to control ourselves. We want to control and regulate ourselves in a way that we think is right. We want to make sure that our AI models are responsible. We want to make sure that our services are responsible and that we are prioritizing people. Hence, if you go to our website, for example, nebulae.com, you'll see a big banner that says people first. That's our motto. That's not because anybody's forcing us. We can literally, I kind of freak people out when I say this, but as I said, I'm being honest. We can literally decide to become quote unquote evil AI company. We can use AI to do all sorts of negative things that would destroy your lives. And guess what? We can get away with it. I mean, does that sound satisfactory to you? It's not to me, right? So what we're doing is purely our choice. And in fact, even Apple, Tim Cook, he made a point that they do what they do with Apple Intelligence. That's all these extra guardrails that they're adding and all that security. Again, not because it's regulation. I agree with Tim Cook. He actually said this is a choice that they made. They're not waiting for regulation. They just decided that they want to do it. They believe that it's the right thing to do. I commend them to that. Well, although we will see, once the deregulation happens, during the Trump's presidency, will Apple continue? We shall see. I think they will because they've been doing it for a while, but we'll see. You never know. But ultimately, we need to be responsible ourselves. So if you're running a company that wants AI and digital transformation, don't wait for regulations. Yes, be aware of what's going on out there 100%, but regulate yourself. You make that decision. Hey, how do I protect my brand? Do I want my customers and my users to trust me with my AI or not? If the answer is yes, then you have to take it seriously. You need to put guardrails and you need to basically hire people like Valeria who effectively will tell you, look, this is the impact of your technology or potential impact of your technology that will have on your target users, right? This is what we do as well with my company. We've got a whole thing called the Human Lab, which basically where we look at human behaviors. We try to understand what are the potential impact of AI on how people behave in a good way, bad way, etc. So this is something that is emerging in the world of tech, which is great. Maybe it's a bit too late, but at least I suppose better later than never, I suppose. But yeah, in your case, for your family, for your business or whatever project that you're working on, absolutely use that motto that we use in my company, people first. What will that do to the people that you're targeting? You absolutely need to do that because also research has shown, and I have, I think, discussed this in some of my previous videos, but you can check it out there, that basically, if you are to say that your business is using AI nowadays, or that your app or your product is using AI, it puts people off. So people will potentially stop using your app and your business if you basically try to show off to say that we are AI powered. Well, people will be like, oh, okay, we're not interested, right? It's happening. So be very careful with that as well. So don't overdo. I mean, the AI hype is going to explode. I've predicted that, and it will explode sooner rather than later. So you might as well start thinking about what would be your best strategy to move forward, where yes, you can still deploy AI within your ecosystem, but you don't have to kind of go on about it, right? What is the value proposition of your smart system? But ultimately, again, going back to people first, it's trust. That is the key success factor in the world of tech today. Who do you trust the most? People don't care about how powerful your AI is. People care about, can they trust you? Can they trust your AI? Can you trust your business with their data, with their mental health, with their, cognition, etc., etc. So I hope this conversation will give you some ideas and some of the things to think about. Again, if you have any questions, if you've got any things that you want to debate about, make sure you do that in the comments below. And we will continue with this conversation. I'll be bringing more guests in this particular field. It's a fascinating field. It's so complicated. It's not really black and white, as it were. And I think we need to have this discussion, and we're going to delve much deeper into that to help you with your mental health and your cognition to make sure that these technologies don't impact it in a negative way. In other words, I want to fight digital amnesia. We can all do it together. All right. Anyway, guys, as always, subscribe, help us share this channel and grow this channel. You can check out all of the sponsors in the description below to help us grow even further. Or if you've got cash to spare, you can become a member at only $5 a month, or you can put any amount. We've got some members that are just giving us $1. That's cool. Everything really does help. I want this to be a community-driven operation so that we can have these open discussions as honestly and as transparently as we possibly can to serve you and serve all of us. So, my friends, until the next time, much love. Peace.